Now, what we are going to do this evening is to start looking at what good and effective governance is. And we're going to look at it both as a concept and also through the eyes of the key parties involved. Our aim in bringing together the Chartered Governance and Secretarial Livery Company with educational interests is to try and identify ways in which the governance of schools can be improved. Now, to start us off this evening, we have Hannah Stolten. Hannah is from Governors for Schools, which is a national education charity that serves the state school sector by finding volunteers to be appointed as school governors and academy trustees. They match volunteers with vacancies and so far have facilitated over 2,000 volunteer appointments. Hannah joined the organisation in 2017, became chief executive in 2020. But before that, she was a primary school teacher, worked in the recruitment field, and is currently chair of governors at a primary school in Essex. So extremely well qualified to start us off. Hannah, we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks ever so much, David. Lovely to be here. Did you want to introduce the other panelists first, or should I crack on?
If you start, I'll introduce the panelists as we go through.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to share my slides. So hopefully you can all see that. Okay.
We can.
Yes, brilliant. Okay, so thanks ever so much, David. As David said, I am CEO here at Governors for Schools, national charity that recruits volunteers to be governors and trustees for the state sector. I'm also a chair of governors. I have been a chair of governors for 6 years now of a primary school that is on the Essex-Hertfordshire borders. We have a 1.5 form intake, so a bit of a different setup to a lot of primary schools. But I really do love the role, and I'm very passionate about asking other people to join in governance. And hopefully I can talk to you about why I think it is so vital for schools and the pupil wellbeing. So I've been asked to talk about why effective governance is necessary and what it looks like in practice. I would say that it's vital for ensuring that schools operate efficiently, providing quality education for all students to achieve their potential. That's basically what we want to do as governors, obviously. It's also key to promoting the wellbeing of students, of teachers, and the broader community. Governors and trustees make up the biggest volunteering workforce in the UK, so it's a huge army of volunteers that give up their time. And while the face of governance is changing, we've obviously got the split model now where we've got maintained schools and multi-academy trusts. It's really still just as key as ever, if not more key, that it ensures they run effectively for the benefit of all pupils and for wider society as well. We know as governors and as general society that every child will only have one opportunity to get the most out of their education. So it's really key that the governance is making sure that schools are giving an effective education for every child. I wanted to give you a quick overview. I don't know how much each of you knows about what the governor role is, but there are 3 main facets of the role, and these are in the governance handbook. It has just been updated, literally in the last week. So if you haven't looked at the most recent version, you're a governor, then have a quick look. The role of governor or trustee is to ensure clarity of the vision, ethos, and strategic direction of the school. They hold the executive leaders, so the head teachers, to account for the educational performance of the school and its pupils, ensuring its effective and efficient performance management of staff. And they oversee the financial performance of the school and make sure that its money is well spent. So they hold those sort of 3 facets. looking after, making sure the finances are right, overseeing the head teacher, and ensuring that the ethos is set and the strategy is as we would want. And I mentioned that the face of governance is changing, so I thought it might be useful to start off with what that looks like in terms of academy versus maintained schools. As I said, I'm in a maintained school. So I've started off with the maintained governing board structure. The maintained schools receive their funding from the Department for Education via the local authority. So they will receive that funding through the local authority. They'll have a governing board, usually of about 12 people, and the governing board is the school's legally accountable body. It's accountable for the individual school to the local authority, and if relevant, it might be to the diocese or the relevant religious body. So if it depends on whether it's a faith school or whether it's whether or not. Okay, so that's a maintained school structure. The academy governance structure is quite different. School trusts are charitable companies, and so they follow the Charity Commission guidance on structures. They receive their funding directly from the Department for Education, so it doesn't come through the local authority. And they have several layers of governance. You can see members at the top there. As in most charities, members are the foundation of the legal structure, so the charity has to have them to exist. Then each academy trust will have a board of trustees. They oversee the whole of the multi-academy trust or single academy trust, depending on the makeup. So overseeing multiple schools in most cases. Charity trustees are both, the trustees of a multi-academy trust are both charity law trustees and company law directors. So they hold responsibility for the strategic leadership, accountability and assurance, and the strategic engagement, as well as the finance. So the same things as they would in the maintained schools, but just to a greater level, because they're overseeing multiple schools as much as any, and they are seen as directors in company law. A trust will then have a number of different committees. So they'll have their trust board committees, which are made up of trustees. So that might be things like the audit and the risk committee. And they'll also have, in most cases, smaller committees, local school committees, which are assigned to an individual school. So the Confederation of School Trusts has done some research into those local school committees and identified that there are three general types that exist. There are local advisory committees where they don't have any delegated governance functions or powers. They're there to sort of meaningfully engage with the local community and parents. Then there's local school committees who have some limited delegated governance functions, again, no powers, but they might scrutinise standards, health and safety, safeguarding, community engagement. And then there's the local governing boards, which are much more similar to the maintained school boards of previous, and they have a fuller set of delegated functions, which may include some levels of finance over the school. But generally, when you're in a multi-academy trust of finance, it's at the trustee level rather than a local governing board. So that's a bit of an overview. I'll put the link there at the bottom to those three different types. But when we recruit people into trustee positions, governor positions, or onto those local governing boards. And we sort of talk to people as we go about what sort of level, because as a trustee, you have much less engagement with a local school. And many people come to us saying, oh, I'd like to be involved with the local, much more hands-on, even though it's a strategic role, I hasten to say. It is a strategic role, but some people prefer to be assigned to a specific school. So the title was why is effective governance necessary, and what does it look like in practice? So I thought the best way to do this would be to talk you through my governance year, as it were. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the autumn term and basically take you through what we do as a board of governors. So I'm, as I said, primary school governing board of 12 people, what we do to show what we do on the ground and why it is absolutely necessary for the school, for the pupils in their care, and really to support the head teacher and the staff to do the best job that they possibly can. So starting in September, exciting time in school, fresh start and all of that sort of stuff. So we'll generally start as a governing board with by joining the staff inset day. So they'll have a whole staff inset day where we will do some safeguarding training with the staff. It's really important to say that all governors, as well as all staff, are responsible for safeguarding. While we have a lead safeguarding governor, and we will assign somebody into that role in that September meeting so that we know who that person is, every governor is just as responsible for safeguarding and should always flag if there's an issue. Every governor needs to have read Keeping Children Safe in Education. They need to have had that safeguarding training. So in that staff inset day, generally start off with some sort of safeguarding training. We'll then appoint the chair and any other governors into roles that we might have. So for example, we have a wellbeing governor, we have a safeguarding governor, and we think about what other lead governors we need in different areas. We might have had a few resignation or two over the summer, so we'll think about, is there a requirement that we need to go out for more governors? Do we need to go out for parent governors? Because obviously a governing board made up of lots of different people from the community, parents, as well as staff. So we've got to make sure that we get a good mix with a variety of skills, thinking about the skills that we need. On that day, it's an opportunity to really do that first part of the governance role, thinking about the strategy and the ethos of the school. So thinking of the year ahead, we'll have the school improvement plan, which is a document that all schools will have. It's a live document, and we'll have reviewed it at the end of the previous year and thought about the objectives for the year ahead. So we'll review that school improvement plan and sort of talk through what our key objectives are for the year. Linking to that, we'll plan out some governor visits. So when governors are going to go into school and see what's happening on the ground so that they can start triangulating all of the information that we get to ensure good governance, to ensure we are really happy and comfortable with what we're being told by the head teacher is happening, what we're seeing on the ground, and what we're hearing from perhaps pupils or parents. So that's all in that first day, really, when we normally have a full day together. So as well as planning out the governor visits, we might also think about our policy review schedule. So as governors, key part of our role is reviewing policies that the school has. So some of those will be delegated to school, others we want to oversee. So we're not writing policies, we're just reading them, making sure that we agree and fully understanding them and are on board with them, because that's what we want to see in practice when we go into the schools, so that we can fully be happy that things are happening as we would like. So that would be a September meeting. We then have in October a finance meeting, and in that finance meeting we start looking at the budget, or not start looking at the budget, we continue to look at the budget, which has been set in April. So budget is set in April. It's regularly checked by our finance committee as a maintain school. We have a couple of committees, we have a number of committees, but two key ones are the finance committee and the pupil related committee. The finance looks at finance and risk. Pupil related looks more at curriculum and pupil data. So finance meeting, absolutely key. More than ever, it feels like budgets are tight. How are we tracking against the budget that we set? Has anything unexpected come up? What are we spending that money on, essentially looking at that detail. And we do meet as a finance committee. We are now meeting every month. It's not something that we used to do, but because budgets are so tight at the moment, we really need to keep close guard on what is happening with school finance. So we meet every month. Later in the term, normally around November time, we also have the head teacher performance review. So that sits under the governors. So obviously the head teacher essentially reports into the governors. We're responsible for appointing the head teacher. So if the head teacher left, we would be the ones who appoint a new head teacher. So we have a head teacher performance review. It's not just done in isolation by the governors. We have our school improvement partner come in from the local authority to do that performance review with us. And it's a really good opportunity to think about objectives of the school, the head teacher's objectives, but key is also her well-being. We want to make sure that she's feeling, or she or he is feeling supported, and is making sure that they're doing okay, so that they can make sure that the school is doing okay. It's a busy term, the autumn term, as you can see, and it's probably the busiest of the school year, I would say. Sometimes we end up the end of I would say the end of the autumn term, the highlight is going in and serving Christmas dinner. So we do that with the pupils, go and meet the pupils. It's a lovely opportunity to sort of talk to staff in a less formal setting. And really, it's lovely to be part of the school community in that respect. So after a well-earned Christmas break that the staff have, we move on to the spring term. And the first thing that we do in the spring term is we look at a data drop, which the staff will have done of pupil progress. So we do this actually in conjunction with the deputy head teacher in our school and also the SENCO, the special needs coordinator, because what we want to be doing when we're looking at that data is thinking about the different groups of children, how each has performed. So we might want to look at children with English as an additional language. We might want to look at children who have got special needs, boys, girls, year 4, year 2, whatever it might be. We want to have a real good look at that data. We don't know, it's not names of individual children, it's looking at groups of data and sort of analysing it and thinking about, okay, well, why is this data not as we would expect? What's happening here? And asking those probing and challenging questions, that's a real thing. I think being curious and asking those challenging and just interested questions is really key for being a good governor, I would say. So we want to add colour to that. We may go in and do some school visits. So we might want to go in and look at what's going on. So there may be specific things that come out of that data that we think, okay, actually, let's go and have a look. It might be stuff that's against the school improvement plan. We have then, at the end of January, we start planning the budget. So that's quite a key part of the school year. We need to plan the budget. As I said, it is tricky right at the moment. It's been quite an arduous process, I would say, this year. We're just coming to the end of it now, we're just about there. But we have had to make some really difficult decisions on staffing. You know, where pupil numbers are dropping in some schools, so that's something that you would have to discuss. How are you going to manage that? What are you going to do if you've got, you know, resourcing problem issues? All of those things are the conversations that you're going to have as a governor, talking to the head teacher, challenging, but in a, you know, constructive way and in a supportive way. How are you taking this forward? Because it's tough. It's a tough job being a head teacher. I know that I wouldn't want to do it. It's a lot to ask of one person. So hopefully we're the support network for that head teacher in making those difficult decisions. As a maintained school, we have to submit the school's financial value standard. So this is a document that we submit to the local authority, which is a bit like an audit document. I've just read it last night, actually. So it's a bit like an audit document about, you know, to check that you're following the process for when setting the budget and thinking about the funding for the next year. In addition to that process, we do have other audits. So we have cyber audits, GDPR audits, finance audits. All of those things are going on in school. All of that comes to the governors, so that, again, that triangulation of evidence, so that we can think, okay, well, we've got the evidence from external advisors, so we've got the audit information. We might have a consultant come in who's specialising in a certain area or a certain subject, come in and they would write a report. We have our school improvement partner who comes from the local authority, also providing us with information. So we bring all of that together over the course of the term. Oops, I've skipped one backwards. And end up at the summer term. So summer term, we'll end, the final term is always a lovely one, or we hope it's a lovely one. It shouldn't be any surprises. It's basically what we've been working through from September. So another data review, we'll have a look at the data that's coming through. We know that we've got SATs coming up. We've got multiplication check. We've got the phonics screening check. If you're in a secondary school, it's going to be GCSEs or A-levels. There shouldn't be any surprises coming down the line. That's what you're hoping. You're hoping that you've had those conversations throughout the year. You've seen what's happening. And then when those test and exam results come in, it's okay, this is what we expected. Absolutely, if things aren't quite as you'd expected, then that's a conversation to be had, but that's what you're hoping for. We attend parents' evening to get parental feedback, so that we're really engaging with the community. We speak to different staff. Early years is key for us because early years curriculum is very different to the rest of the school, so getting feedback from the lead of the early years and how the pupils have managed since they started in September. There's a lot at the moment about school readiness, that pupils are not coming into school ready. How have they progressed in that year? It's a big jump from reception to year one, especially in our school where they're actually going to a year 1-2 class. So they're going from years being 4 and 5 into a class of 5 to 7-year-olds. And actually, that's a big jump. So we want to make sure that they're ready for the next step. And absolutely, what we want to do is celebrate the school successes, have that community engagement, go to the school play, go to sports day and enjoy those lovely activities. We write to our parents and tell them this is what's happened over the course of the year, celebrate those successes, talk about what we're going to do going forward. And we also review our own practice. So we do a governance review of what's gone well for us as a governing board, what training have we needed and we didn't quite get to, and we need to make sure that that happens next year. So we have that governance review and thinking about what next for us. I think that's a general nice school year if everything goes to plan, and there aren't any sort of curveballs. There are other things that do happen. We do have parental complaints, and it's an area that is increasing. There's been quite a bit in the education press about it recently, about the number of parental complaints that are coming through. So that is something that's happening. We have potentially safeguarding issues, staffing personnel issues, and unfortunately, in the 10 years that I've been a governor, I have had one exclusion panel at a primary school, and it's not a nice experience at all to have to go to, and it is quite a challenging situation to be in. But more and more, sadly, especially in secondary schools, exclusion panels is something that governors do get involved with. So to finish, I'd say our aim as governors is to create an environment where students can thrive academically, can thrive socially and emotionally. And it really requires really close collaboration with the leadership team, supporting them on their journey for improvement, to ensure that all students are receiving that really high quality education that we need. It's absolutely necessary for me, governance, and I think my head teacher would probably say the same, that she really welcomes the support and challenge that our governing board gives her on that school improvement journey. And that's me.
Thank you, Hannah, very much for that brilliant and comprehensive introduction to what it is all about. Thank you for taking us through the year, and thank you for bringing out some of the accountabilities, the challenges of the external environment, the shortage of resources. And of course, that's an external environment which is changing more quickly and less predictably and making the job more difficult for governors. And for me, what you brought out beautifully was the range of the role, from the sort of money and the strategy to the humanity and the community. And all of those bits are important. Let's change the focus now, and let's look at the fundamental principles of good governance. And to help us with this, we have Sheila Lumsden. Sheila is now chair of the Education Committee of our worshipful company. She formerly had a long career with the British Council, where she ended up as Deputy Director for Europe, among other roles. She has a very strong governance background, and the examination question that we've set for Sheila is, what are the fundamental principles of good governance, and what is service with integrity? Sheila, over to you.
Thank you very much, David, and good evening, everyone. And let's see if Sheila can pass the first test and share her screen.
Yeah.
Hopefully, are we all seeing that now?
Yes.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you. I can see that we actually have an international community with us tonight, because of course, whilst we're focusing on schools in the UK, actually much of what we're saying is potentially and can be relevant to any and all schools. So it's wonderful to see you there, Barry, from South Africa, and great that that international context is here also this evening. Thank you for that. So yes, as David says, I'm going to look very briefly at the principles of good governance. So this is sort of taking it out to what is good governance, whether it's a school, an academy, a multi-academy trust, or indeed actually whether you're the trustee of a charity, the director of a company, a social enterprise, a community interest company, whatever they are, whatever the legal status is, a school, actually the 7 principles of governance are largely the same. The focus may be very different to each, but actually they're largely the same. So is the school purpose clear? Are you really clear as a governor, the vision, the values, the mission of the school? Leadership, is it good, both from the Board of Governors point of view, but also from the school point of view, head teacher, but equally so, as Hannah was saying, is it actually clear where the levels of leadership are? Because sometimes these days that actually can be quite complex, where leadership in different areas actually lies. Integrity underpinning absolutely everything. David mentioned their service with integrity. Service with integrity is actually the motto for the Worshipful Company of Charter Secretaries and Administrators. And integrity is absolutely ensuring that things are being done for the right reason, in the right way, and within the values of that organisation. So is everything being done with that in mind? Decision-making, very much leading back to Principle 2 and leadership. Is it clear where the decision-making actually lies for different areas? And is there good decision-making? Is there a really clear risk safeguarding framework and controls in place? Board effectiveness, that's really actually looking both at the individual governor. Every governor will come with their own expertise, with their own knowledge that they are bringing to that board of governors. Is that individual knowledge being used collectively and collaboratively together to develop one whole, very good board of governors? Diversity, equity, inclusion. How does that manifest it within this itself, within the school or academy that you may be a governor of? The focus, of course, will be very different in each school, each academy, but is it there and how does it manifest itself? And then openness and accountability being Principle 7. The accountability, is it clear where the reporting line is to the local authority, to the Department of Education, and indeed to any other partners that the school may be working with? And openness. That word transparency will often be used. I actually really like the word openness because I think actually it gives a different emphasis to it, and it actually gives an individual emphasis to it as well, and develops that open environment, which is as important as the transparency in terms of ensuring that there is a safe environment as a board of governors where people feel that they can ask questions, that there is no daft question, there is no stupid question. It's really important to ask the question, because very often it's when the question isn't asked that leads to the problems and the issues. So is there that openness to share, but also to challenge? Another way of very briefly looking at those 7 principles, I've just put them there. It's really helpful maybe just to very quickly think through with your own board of governors, if you are a governor within the board, are those 7 principles covered? Are there areas that actually could be looked at? But perhaps a simpler way sometimes even of looking at those 7 principles is to look at 4 areas: direction, effectiveness, supervision, and the accountability. So the direction, that very much brings in the leadership, the setting the strategy, being really clear about what the school is aiming to achieve. Are you really clear about the ethos, vision, values of the school, the trust, the academy with which you're working, and how it's going to do it? The how is as important as the what. The effectiveness, That's, of course, using all resources, be those financial, as Hannah was saying, budgets everywhere are tight, but it's not only the financial resources, how are the other resources, all resources being used to ensure that the school, the academy, the trust has the desired outcomes that everybody is working towards as that school and as that board of governors. Supervision, that covers, of course, everything from the monitoring of performance, as Hannah was saying, be that monitoring performance of the school, the management, the board of governors themselves, and ensuring that everything is on track. And the accountability coming back to the reporting to those who need to know and have an interest. And is that really clear? And is it done in the right way and in a timely fashion? So one can look at the 7 principles, or one can equally look at these 4 areas, which sometimes is an easier way to look at it, depending on size and scale, can have an impact which way it's best to look at it, or just most effective to help develop those frameworks. I think possibly there's 3 key considerations to look at, and really important if you are a governor on a board. And I say this is relevant to whether it's a board of governors or a board of trustees for charity or a board of directors for a company. Challenge, getting it right, and supportive challenge is what I've called it here. And the sort of little example I've given there is how the question is asked can make such a big difference to actually what outcome it gets or what conversation it establishes around the table. So even better if may lead to a very different conversation than it's really awful and this is what we need to do. So really how things can be phrased can make all that difference to the type of challenge and the supportive challenge that is hopefully wanted for. Expertise, working, as I said previously, collaboratively and collectively. Everybody is coming as an individual governor to that board of governors, but how effective is the board working as one to support the whole school, all the pupils, all the staff in that continual improvement and raising standards. So you may come with individual expertise, but it's how that expertise is used collectively for the whole of the school. These probably look very basic things, but actually it can be very easy to sometimes just, we all do it, don't we, on occasion, sit there and don't ask the question. And there's probably somebody else at the board wanting to ask the same question. So never be afraid to ask the question. And whether one's been on the board for a number of years as board of governor, or it's the first meeting, ask those questions, ask for clarity. Be that critical friend with integrity. And actually asking those questions, that comes back to that word integrity. As Hannah was very clearly outlining in her presentation, be really clear about the governing body structure for the school, the academy, the trust that you're working in. It will be different for each, and therefore it's really important to know how those connect and what the subcommittees are for the ones that you may be working with yourself. Because there are so many, as Hannah, I think, alluded to, early years is very different to secondary. There might be areas in terms of risk, in terms of safeguarding, curriculum, but understanding the governing body structure, understanding the different subcommittees that there may be for the board of governors that you're working with or as trustees, really important to do. And I think also the other really important thing is making sure that it's known what the focus is for each meeting. Know what's important for that meeting that you're at. So as Hannah was saying, there's a very clear timeline to the spring term, the autumn term, the summer time. So being really clear what the focus is so that what's important doesn't get lost. So how can those 7 governance principles or those 4 governance areas of direction, supervision, etc., actually help to develop that framework, which both enables the board of governors to hold the school management team to account, but actually really importantly that the school management team also hold the board to account. And you can see a number of areas there. I'm not going to go through them all, but I think hopefully pulling those together along with principles can really help to develop that framework, and really useful to think if you are already a governor or thinking about being a governor of a school or an academy. Are these areas all clear within the school or academy that you're working with, or are there perhaps areas that could be looked at? Culture, of course, being incredibly important. Is the culture of the school embedded really well. And importantly, is the culture of the school also reflected in the Board of Governors? Ethics and integrity, supporting the whole management team, and really importantly, that duty of care to all staff and pupils and the Board of Governors themselves. As Hannah said, there's lots of wonderful elements to being a governor, and really powerful and impactful. Also, there can be some challenging things. So that duty of care, really important for everybody. So very briefly, going back to that principle 3, integrity and service with integrity. I think there's 3 really key questions to ask, which is very helpful to ensure that are these aligned. So what do you believe in your role as a governor? Do you really understand and know the ethos, the values, the vision of the school? Does that align with your own values? What do you believe collectively as a Board of Governors? And do those values reflect the values of the school? If one was to look at the values of the school and to look at how the Board of Governors are working together, do those values reflect the values of the school? And what do staff and pupils believe and want from the board? So asking those 3 questions at the individual level, the collective Board of Governors level, and staff and pupils can be a really helpful way to see whether the clear values, vision, mission of the school are clearly stated and also clearly aligned through each of those areas. And that just brings me back to leave you with these words from C.S. Lewis. Integrity is doing the right thing even when nobody's watching. Thank you, David. I will hand back to you and look forward to discussion after all speakers.
Thank you very much indeed, Sheila. That was probably the clearest and most succinct description of what governance is in this context that I have heard. So thank you very much for putting that together. Also, what I think you brought out very successfully is the human insights that governors need to do the job well, and the skills that they need to do the job well, which are not necessarily particularly technical or advanced, but just need to be developed and applied. And just a short advertisement here. The concept of integrity is very interesting. And even though it's our motto, we are interested in trying to understand it to a deeper level. And on the 4th of June, we will be having one of these webinars about the concept of integrity. And if you don't usually receive notices from us and would like to come to that, just let the clerk know and we will invite you. Just by way of housekeeping, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and then we will take all of the questions after the presenters have finished. Let's shift the lens again. And Hannah, in her presentation, mentioned the importance of the head teacher, the chief executive in the school. And we now have a head teacher, a chief executive, Anthony Wilson. Anthony is chief executive of Newham Community Learning, which is a multi-academy trust. Formerly, he was head teacher of Lister Community School for 10 years. And the examination question which we've set for Anthony is, what can governors do to help the school and the head teacher to succeed? Anthony.
Hello, David, and very nice to be here. I think I may be confusing people a little bit if they're looking to see who's speaking, because in a moment I will be sharing the presentation, and I'm doing it on a different machine because that makes it a little bit easier to to make sure I've got the audio right. So, but we do have relatively low bandwidth. So I'm just going to wait for confirmation that you can see the presentation before I go ahead. Just loading, it says. Give that one more try at getting it up. There we are. I think you should be able to see that now.
You can indeed.
Okay. So just before I start, I want to offer a couple of reflections. Firstly, it's very nice to be here with contributions from Hannah initially on governors for schools, and I would say we've had some fantastic governors appointed through Governors for Schools. Really appreciate what you do. Highly recommend your organisation whenever I'm speaking to other heads who are feeling frustrated about not having the right quality of governing body. And it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge that we've been very fortunate in our trust, Newham Community Learning, to have sustained links with literary organisations, including chartered secretaries, which has meant that we have got some really, really high quality governors who made a huge contribution. Having said that, I was listening to both those excellent presentations and just thinking to myself, what an extraordinary thing it is that we ask of governors as volunteers. I think there's a very proud tradition of voluntary service and voluntary contribution, and I would have huge reservations about switching over to paid governor roles across the wider system. But it's difficult to think of any area where we expect so much of volunteers in terms of the level of expertise they have to develop in order to carry out their role, and the sheer amount of time they have to put in, and sometimes dealing with very difficult situations. As a governor in a school, you may find yourself caught up in some complicated internal politics within the school, or issues involving the local community. Sometimes that can also have an effect on governors who live close to the community or have children in the school. So it's a huge amount that we ask. I'm going to be coming back to the point, I think, in a minute or two about governors' presence in school. And I do think that my experience over time with governors, that point, it was just so great hearing from Hannah about all the different ways that governors are engaged. It is a very big commitment. I hope it's a rewarding one for governors, and it feels to me as though it can only really be rewarding if you're not just going to the meetings. So my advice for anybody thinking about being a governor is that if you have that conversation and somebody says, well, you need to come to this many meetings a year, and that's all you think you can manage, it probably isn't the right decision to go ahead, because the job is only really worthwhile if you're able to be part of the life of the school. You do your job effectively if you're part of the life of the school, but also that's the really rewarding bit, because David might disagree, because he was at an absolutely fantastic audit and risk committee the other day. But for most of us, there's more to life than committees, and I hope very much that people will find that when they are governors, that they get a really enjoyable experience from that. So I think I've got on screen for you now two key phrases which we've already heard a couple of times this evening: support and challenge and critical friend. And I'm going to come back to those in a moment. We referenced also some of the frameworks that exist, and I've looked at the Academy Trust Governance Code. I work myself in an Academy Trust now, but I was a head in a maintained school and have been through that process of academisation. And I think the principles that I'm going to be speaking about apply equally to both sectors, because I'm looking really at the fundamentals of the relationship. And those questions of strategic leadership, accountability and assurance and engagement apply whether you're in the maintained sector or in the academy sector. The structures and some of the issues you will have to deal with work out in different ways. But how simple is the idea of those three things? Just go back again: strategic leadership, accountability and assurance, engagement. And I'm going to just click through a slide where I've tried to put some of the things that your head teacher may be experiencing when they're engaging with the local governing body. So first of all, we've got the head teacher there. You might have to bring the slides up again, because I think we lost connection for a moment. thank you for putting that in the chat, because I saw that and I can try to reshare. There we are. And you've got your head teacher there in the middle, and you've got the local governing body or perhaps the trust board overseeing the work. And your head teacher, you would expect, when they're turning up for a meeting, would have prepared thoroughly for the trust board and be focused on providing you with the information that you need. It may be more complicated in the academy sector if they have a CEO overseeing what they're doing. Naturally, if the CEO has asked them for a meeting that day about school performance, then they're likely to have focused on that meeting as well. There is the small matter that they may be worried about Ofsted and focusing on that. I'm going to put a couple more things on the slide. We're going to, oh yes, Department for Education, always ready with useful clarification. Some of us will remember the experience of going through lockdown and getting guidance about what we were supposed to be doing in the holidays, but exactly 0 working days before we were supposed to implement it. And of course, the Department for Education is overseeing this fractured system where really important issues like SEND and admissions are multiple people's responsibility within the system, and therefore to some extent nobody's responsibility. Anybody else? Oh yeah, Ofqual, overseeing qualifications. If your head teacher has had a call from Ofqual suggesting that there might be some irregularities to be looked at, that will have taken up some attention before the meeting. ESFA, overseas school funding. If somebody can put in the chat a short answer as to why we need to have ESFA and Ofsted and DFE all working. I was going to say working together, but they don't actually work together. They are sending out interesting information. I don't want to imply, however, that the only contradictions are between those organisations, because quite often the contradictions are coming from within those organisations. I have had the experience as a head teacher and as a CEO of being called by the ESFA and told I absolutely cannot do something because it's not financially allowed, and then being called up by somebody else in the ESFA the same day and told that I have to do it. Now, what else have we got on here? Oh yeah, parents. Parent may have insisted on coming to see the head teacher before the meeting, perhaps something that they're very concerned about. And then the union rep at the school and the students. And I know this is a rather cluttered slide, but I think what I'm sure you're all able to see the point which I'm driving at, which is that sometimes in preparation for a governing body meeting, there will have been a few other pressing concerns and pressing considerations for the head teacher. When you work with the school over a period of time, you will develop a sense for the competing priorities. I don't think that schools are unique in being environments where there are a lot of different things going on, but we are a very highly regulated sector with multiple accountabilities. And the point in any individual school where all of those come together is the head teacher themselves. So what are those accountabilities? Is it reasonably straightforward? We want to get good results for the students. Of course, academic outcomes are going to be something that we're going to need to talk about. And we are going to look at budget and audit. And of course, safeguarding I've put at the top of the slide, because safeguarding is everybody's top priority. We know that's the case because they pay lip service to that very regularly. Whether or not amid this complicated slide, they have actually had time to drill down into it and give it the attention that it needs in every school on every day is another matter. A few other things. We can't keep the students safe and we can't get the outcomes up without attendance being right. And of course, when they are in school, we want to make sure the behaviour systems are correct. I'm only putting on this slide the things that I know governors in my school and in every school are paying attention to all the time. And I don't think there's anything on here that would be accepted for either the head teacher or the governing body not to have focused on. But I think just worth here, curriculum. Yes, we're going to have to talk about curriculum. Equalities, GDPR. Nobody's ever let off the hook on GDPR, are they? Staff training. We can't deliver on everything else if we haven't got a good programme for the staff. Recruitment and retention, if we haven't got staff through the door. And that's clearly quite time consuming. Governance itself and the process of working through, for example, the risk register is my current favourite topic that I need to keep revisiting and working through with my trust board. Health and safety, complaints, as has just been mentioned, there is an increasing number of complaints. So we have all of those things going on. not every governor is going to be expected to be an expert in every one of those areas. I would suggest that the head teacher, unfortunately, for better or worse, is expected to keep an eye on this, without being a partisan of the Academy Trust system, which I think has many weaknesses. I would suggest that one of the potential benefits is that in a school which is part of a trust, there is a greater range of expertise, hopefully, in the central team, so that the pressure on the individual head teacher of following all these areas is somewhat reduced. But nonetheless, all of these areas are going to be covered in governing body meetings in the course of the year. So going back to taking that into account, I think that is one thing I wanted to share from the head teacher's perspective, is the sheer range of accountabilities and the range of issues that they may be dealing with in the run up to a governing body meeting. I don't think I've even mentioned one or two of the particular bugbears in my own career. If you have to deal with an employment tribunal, if you have to deal with a very serious incident where a young person has been seriously harmed, if you have to deal with a difficult PFI contract, again, the range of issues that can suck in senior leadership time and that governors need to take account of while developing their engagement with the head is very wide. I would suggest, just on this first point, it's hugely helpful from the head teacher's point of view and chief executive point of view to have a shared understanding about what the parameters of that relationship are. And I will come in a minute or two to some do's or don'ts. What's the difference between operational and what is the purview of the head teacher, and what is the responsibility of the governing body to set policy and direction and vision and ethos? It's a little bit like the biscuit cake, Jaffa cake question. There will always be something in the middle where we're not entirely sure which side it belongs to. But I would suggest that detailed work jointly on the vision and ethos, and having conversations about the vision and ethos and long-term direction of the school, having some form of scheduled time to talk about the 3-year plan and the 5-year plan, which absolutely are appropriate areas for governors to be. You would really want your governing body to be very engaged in that. If you have those and governors are focused on those, that and there is that understanding that operational matters are operational matters which are reported to the governing body, but they're not making those decisions, that's a very important foundation for the relationship. Accountability and assurance. I just want to say this because I think it's so important. The best information that governors have is what they find for themselves. It is clearly important that accurate data is shared with governors, and data tells you a lot, but it cannot be a substitute for talking to people in a school. And there have sadly been plenty of occasions where governing bodies have been presented with information which shows that there are very low exclusions, very low suspensions, all the academic data is on track, and then schools actually hit the rocks, and there wasn't that advance awareness of that. And I would be prepared to wager that in almost every case where there isn't that understanding, it's because governors haven't been in the school and haven't been talking to people other than the head teacher. Just moving on, I've already made the point several times, no substitute for visiting the school. So I'm going to just round up and with a beautiful little image there. I hope you can see of two young ladies on a seesaw, and I think this is something which nobody can give you definitive advice. How do you balance the critical friend element? We need our governors and our trustees to be well informed, to be prepared to challenge. In fact, it's essential that their challenge is minuted in the records, that the challenge is demonstrated, and we want them to insist on the best for students. But they also need to be aware of all the pressures on the head teacher as an individual and on other staff, and it comes down to individual skills. And perhaps that's one of the rewarding things for governors is this is a very sensitive job, but it's very much about interpersonal skills. Without that ability to get that balance right, and which comes down to judging the situation and reading where the individuals are There are certain times when you will need to have a tough conversation with a head teacher about standards in a school, but there will also be days when it's absolutely not the right day to say anything other than you need to go, let's not have this meeting now because I can see you need to go home, and just process the situation that you've just had to deal with, not talk to me about your performance objectives. So my do's and don'ts, my pitfalls, I thought I would offer in a very simple form. And I think they're all reflecting both positive and negative experience of dealing with governors over time. I believe Churchill said at one point, and Churchill is the most misquoted man in history, but I do believe Churchill said at one point that the power of the Prime Minister is as nothing to the power of an individual head teacher. And what that probably reflects is the politicians' envy of a situation where they imagine a head teacher can take decisions and it just happens. Of course, it isn't quite as simple as that, but there is no doubt that when you enter a school building, the head teacher is in a position of authority over everybody else in that building, whether they're a student or whether they're a member of staff. And it is possible in some circumstances and with some individuals that the head teacher will shape a narrative which suits themselves. And governors need to be aware of that, and that goes back to the point, if the head teacher is the only person that governors are hearing from, then governors aren't doing their duty in terms of exercising due diligence and making sure that they're getting the full picture. The other side of the coin, but a related risk, is being a related point actually, is being too matey. And if the head teacher it's obviously really good to have that positive relationship, but it's not a critical relationship and it's not a challenging relationship if the governing body are there to turn up for drinks with the head teacher and have a nice party, but not pat the head teacher on the back, but not have that objectivity and distance which is necessary in the relationship to be able to ask the tough questions. Being so conceited, do you think you do the job better? I have known a chair of governors in a school that I had a connection with, who went in and met the head teacher every week and then was down the pub bemoaning the fact to quite a few members of the school community that it was a shame that they had to do that quite so often, but really he just needed to be told every week what to do and that she had time to do it. That was not but it was a dereliction of responsibility for the rest of the government. If a head
Oh dear. It seems we have lost Anthony. Keith, are you able to stop the sharing so that we can move on?
Apologies. I don't know if you can hear me now.
Wonderful. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Yes. I was nearly done anyway, but I will just see if I can just finish there. The other side is that people who are not prepared to put themselves forward because that being overly deferential to the school experts, and actually, you're on the governing body because you have a perspective, and the fact that that perspective isn't the same as the education professionals in no way invalidates it, and often is extremely helpful in itself. If I can just do the last two things there. Clearly, head teachers don't appreciate being criticised in public or governors letting it be known that they're not there. I think my most important one out of all of these, however, is not expecting enough for the children. Ultimately, you are there not for the school staff. You are there for the same reason as the school staff, to support the young people. And my gold stars for governors are the ones who do the training. It is really helpful and useful for governors to do training. And sadly, sometimes the governors who've been on the training are better informed than some of the school leads. And there's a really useful dialogue coming out of the training. And it's been fantastically helpful on many occasions to me when governors have been on training and fed that back to the governing body and to school leadership. Reading the papers in advance is obvious, but it is quite good for the morale of senior leaders who've prepared papers for a meeting. And it is normally fairly clear during a meeting whether anybody has read that thing you were up several nights working on. Visit the school, I've done to death, so I'll move on from that. And this is a complementary one to a point on the earlier one, but it's particularly relevant for people with a strong personal connection to the school. The fact that somebody has a personal connection with the school or has had a conversation doesn't mean that they should hold back. So, for example, a parent governor shouldn't refrain from saying things as long as they acknowledge that it is a personal perspective. We've all got different ways into the school, and some, it's useful to have that. I would ask people not to be fobbed off. Governors' meetings have a limited amount of time, and I have seen on numerous occasions in governing bodies something being given a half answer. Now, what that half answer may mean is we don't have the information yet. It may mean I didn't really understand the question, or it may mean I am desperate for this meeting to go over because it's happening quite late after school, or it may mean that the answer is awkward. And the tactful answer may not be to press hard at that point, but if it's important and you didn't get a clear answer, come back to it. And finally, insist on governance being properly resourced. Governance can be very difficult to get right, but it is even more difficult to get right if it's left to the head teacher's PA and the head teacher in spare moments to prepare the papers, to check on the clerking. This is an essential element of what happens in schools, and it's only going to be done correctly if there is proper resourcing for it. A well-resourced and supported governing body is going to be a much more effective one for the school as a whole. So apologies for the audio breakup there, and I hope that's been helpful and interesting, and I'll stop sharing at that point.
Indeed, it has been helpful, Anthony, and it's been particularly helpful because you've shared from your heart and from your experience, of which you have had a lot. I was looking at the number of participants when you were speaking, because as you built the complexity, I had visions of the numbers going down on the basis that this is in the two difficult groups. But you also used a phrase which I think is important. You used the word enjoyable. And we know that the most successful people find enjoyment in what they do, a passion. They have a passion for what they do, and they find enjoyment. And that applies to members of governing bodies. So our last lens tonight is through the eyes of members of governing bodies. And to share it, we have somebody who's been a member of a fair few governing bodies, indeed vice chair of one of them, a member of the Trust Board of Governors for Schools. And Anne Ponta is also a liveryman of both the Educators Company and also our own company of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators. And we've asked Anne to share with us, what do members of governing bodies expect and what will help them to govern better? Anne, over to you.
Thank you very much, David. That's a lovely introduction. And just as you said, this is looking through the lens of the governors themselves. And so I'm focusing on the first part of this challenge. What do members of governing bodies expect? But also the principle that if they generally get what they expect and they abide by the values that Sheila has talked about, then they're going to do a better job. They're going to govern better. And I've conducted quite a number of research projects on school governors over the years. This particular one that I'm going to draw evidence from is a survey of 794 governors. And I was asking them to identify the factors that they expected when they became a governor and what had helped them to govern better. And so that they stayed in post, because one of the challenges, as Hannah will know, is that the retention of governors is a key factor in making sure that schools have that support. And you don't want your governor to leave after just the first year or even a few months because they're not happy or they don't feel that they're making a good contribution. And the other side of the coin were 27 exit interviews of governors who did decide before the end of the first year that they were jumping ship. For whatever reason, which I will go through, they just gave up. And it was really good to see that these data were in fact just two sides of the same coin. So the people who were leaving clearly did not get what the people who were staying found from their governing body. So that was quite a good triangulation factor. In the five, I've grouped all the responses into 5 main topic areas. And I'll just give you the 5 headings first, and then I'll work through them. So the first one is training and preparation. And Anthony did say how important that was, so we'll come back to that. Skills and role, and that's been picked up in a number of ways. Relationships, so has that been picked up. Administration, and then finally, what's in it for me? So in terms of training and preparation, what governors really appreciated was, first of all, having some induction training pre-taking on the role to start with, because they wanted to be sure that what they expected was what they were going to get. Otherwise, then clearly the relationship wouldn't work. So what are the commitments? And an induction meeting at the school, I think Hannah mentioned, certainly Anthony mentioned, the importance of visiting the school, certainly to begin with, and being given a governor pack and having the school policies. Now they'll be on the web, or should be, but having all that information at the start of their one hopes 4 terms or 3 terms, or certainly many years, rather than just jumping ship after a couple of months. And the second thing they really wanted was timely training. Now, Anthony's already told us how valuable it is for governors to have gone off and done training, and how much more they're set out to do the job well. The problem for governors is that the training is often not when they need it. If they have to rock up to a local authority training or training that's put on at various points in the year, it inevitably isn't going to be when they need it. It's probably after they've done it, whatever it is. I can remember having to do exclusions and parental complaints, and the training came 6 months after I'd needed it. So just as a useful point, that Governors for Schools does have these training packs online, and it does mean that you can get into that training when exactly you need it. And that training is going to be bang up to date because of the relationship between Governors for Schools and the Hub, which is the fount of all knowledge on documentation on schools. So really, really useful. So that was point number one. And that is about support. And I think that's one of the things that Sheila mentioned as well. Then skills and role. This was expertise and challenge, I think, was how Sheila put it. And of those 794 governors, 71% said that governors expected to use their skills. If they were not allowed to use their skills, if they were sidelined, if there hadn't been a governing body audit which had identified precisely what this new governor was going to do, and so they weren't engaged, then they became very disaffected. They thought they were just wasting their time. They wanted to be valued, they wanted to be engaged, and that would mean they would govern better. So the two parts of this challenge, expecting and governing better, are really the same thing, but from slightly different angles. I'm very interested to see, just at this juncture, how all of this relates to the new corporate governance code, which came out in January this year. I just got some little snippets of quotations from this new code. The importance of cognitive strengths of board members is mentioned. And that, of course, is just what I'm talking about here in terms of the skills being used in school governance, cognitive strengths being used. And the school and the corporate governance code also emphasizes the strategic role of governors. School governors, in my experience, get driven mad by getting stuck in the weeds of discussions on school uniform and school dinner menus and traffic patrols and all sorts of stuff, which is really quite low level and is not a strategic role that they need to be taking on. And sometimes I think that low level stuff is just a decoy, sometimes to make sure they don't ask the really difficult questions about risk assessments. We've had that mentioned already, haven't we? And the Corporate Governance Code mentions that governors generally in corporate should be focusing on risk assessments across all aspects of the company. And so I think Anthony probably also emphasized that in terms of school governors looking at the risk assessments across all areas of the school. The term critical friend has been used sort of in old currency. I think Ofsted, who slightly reframed this in terms of support but check approach. Critical friend is a softer phrase. Support but check is a little bit harder, not quite as cozy. But it was said earlier that governors should not be fobbed off. They should be terriers and ask the question and get the answer. Another way in which the Corporate Governance Code puts it is comply or explain any departure from the planned outcomes. So if there are targets that the school sets out for performance of certain categories of pupil, if those pupils don't make it, there could be a good reason, but explain what it is. And I guess that's something to always think of when the Ofsted inspectors come. If you can't comply with the targets you set, then there could be a good reason. And if you don't explain it well, there might not be. Dominic O'Connell in the Times, on the 20th of January, on page 29, wrote a lovely article on Be Curious about boardroom members. Be curious. And he says, lack of boardroom curiosity allows corporate problems to take root. And we have only just been hearing the post office scandal, haven't we? So pretty much the same in school governance, really. I think there's so many similarities across the context that probably more or less exactly the same now, particularly with trust boards, which are so much bigger, which carry so much accountability. And they've always been that in private schools, because the buck has always stopped with the governors. On to relationships. Yes, Anthony, again, 71% of these governors said that one of the most satisfying things that they did, which helped them to govern better and which they expected and hoped for, was having a strong relationship with the head teacher, feeling valued by the head teacher. So has to be a little bit of stroking from the head teacher's point of view as well, feeling valued by the head teacher, being engaged with the data, getting into the real meat of the role, so that their voluntary effort was valued. That was not having that was one of the key factors in governors resigning. And then administration, yes, you do expect governors to have read the papers. I would like to say that in my 2 governing bodies that I've experienced, the papers sometimes didn't come until I was sitting at the table on the evening. And I think governors expect the papers to be there as e-data or posted, pigeon post, if that's the only other way. And I think no one has mentioned yet in any context efficient sharing. So important. Keeping to time, keeping slick with the points you've got to get through, keeping to the agenda, getting smart targets out of a meeting, and then monitoring and going back to them the next meeting. There has been a bit of a change in terms of what governors and schools expect in terms of attendance at meetings. I can remember way before lockdown, there was always an expectation, well, a hope that governors would attend bums on seats for every meeting. And the chairs of governors, when appointing, would say, oh, we don't want this person, they live too far away, they're not going to attend. But I think since lockdown, there certainly has been a shift in this. And we've all realised we can do a lot remotely. And perhaps the ideal approach to meetings is to have a mix of face-to-face. There are some things you can do online and some things it's better to do in person. And then lastly, what's in it for me? Well, 80% of governors, this is about integrity. This is about giving something back to the community, to children, giving something, making a worthwhile contribution. That's the top reason for people wanting to become governors in the first place. And it's really heartening to see that altruism is still alive, that people really do it, not for themselves. And it's particularly heartening that there are so many now governors that don't have a direct stakeholder engagement, as it were, in either being a parent or a teacher, or they're sort of more outsiders there, or have an objective view of what's happening in the school. And I think that can be the most valuable type of governor to have, because they can look through things, have not be in any way influenced by some sort of insider opinion. And there are a couple of useful lesser reasons for wanting to be a governor. It does provide career progression. You do learn an awful lot being a governor. You learn to chair committees, you learn to look at data, you learn all sorts of things. And some people like to be part of a more diverse group of people, more diverse than that with those with whom they work or live. So I've just got 3 overall conclusions, sort of synthesizing all of that. And I think you can see how the points relate to what governors expect, what they want and what they hope to get. And if they don't experience that, they may well resign. But some overarching factors I think are quite interesting. The first is that I think governance across all contexts now is pretty much the same. Governance in business and governance in schools. The only difference is that school governors don't get paid, whereas board governors and NEDs usually do. The second thing is, well, the key driver for people once they're in office is being valued. They work well with colleagues if they're valued, and then the role is done well. And are we surprised? That's human nature. And the third thing is, well, the motivation to become a governor in the first place is back to Sheila's presentation. It's about service with integrity. It's this business of wanting to give something back. And I think Hannah has got just a quotation, a very recent one from a governor who said more or less that. So I don't know if I could just zap over to Hannah to finish me off here.
Ask me, I haven't got the quotation to hand, but yeah, we did have, we worked with Bank of England to recruit their employees to be governors, and we just interviewed one of the people from Bank of England, and she said the whole reason that she did it was she wanted to, she was a younger governor, somebody who wasn't linked to the school. She's younger, came from a minority, ethnic minority background, but she wanted to have her voice heard at the table, and she totally did it from altruistic reasons. She gave back to give back to her community, and we see it time and time again, as Anne said, in the people that apply to us. We see it time and time again. The reason that they are motivated to do this, okay, their employer might be telling them to do it, and various other reasons, but essentially, it's to give back. It's normally because either they had a great experience at school or had a really poor experience at school, and they want to improve it or keep it so for the next generation.
Thank you, Hannah. That's me finished.
Well, thank you, Anne, and thank you, Hannah, again. I think it's absolutely great that we've had the benefit of that research, which you did, because it's not just our views, and from our limited samples, those conclusions are well grounded. We will go now to questions and comments for just a few minutes, but before we do so, this is the first seminar or webinar in a series of 3. The second one will be on the 13th of May. And in that one, we will focus on particular challenges which governors face. And some of them have been mentioned tonight. Are you preparing for inspections? What is the role of governors and how that can be done well? What about governors' involvement in strategy development? Anthony mentioned aspects of that, but how can we do it really well? And building on the sort of common thread through members and through schools, we'll share a little bit about the findings from the values research which the Worshipful Company is undertaking and how that applies to schools. But the rest of the agenda and the agenda for the third meeting has still to be determined. And so we invite you to come forward with suggestions of what you think would be useful. And you can send them to the clerk or the executive assistant, and the group which has put these together will consider that, because we want these webinars to be very useful to you. So in the few minutes that we have remaining, are there any questions or comments that participants would like to put to the speakers? If not, I would just like to light on one of them, which was mentioned earlier on, and that is this business of detail or strategy. And whether it's a public sector board or whether it's a school governing body, it's always more easy to deal with the detail than it is with the tough strategic questions. And governors themselves sometimes descend into that. But Anthony, if I can put you on the spot, what do you think the secret is for making sure that governing bodies stay at a level of strategic focus rather than meddling in the details, which are ultimately your responsibility?
I think governors are responsible for setting strategic direction and creating vision and ethos, but they necessarily have to be involved in detail because outcomes are a matter of detail. Good outcomes are only achieved by attention to detail, and governors need to see that work is being done on attendance, that persistent absence is being picked up, that there is analysis of outcomes by ethnicity, by gender, by pupils with free school meals. So, immediately, just looking at the relatively simple area of outcomes, there is a lot of detail. I think a trick here that is important is to make sure that we are looking at the same data in a standard format time and again, and that and that's where I reference I think there are 2 points there. One is the support for the governing body, that there is actually somebody who is responsible for bringing that material in the same format so that governors aren't being asked to thrash around, see it, attachment 3B, and it's a completely different format and structure from the information that was shared the previous time this topic was discussed. Makes a huge difference. It's also very beneficial for the school because what it means is that the school is preparing information for governors in a way that is also going to be, there's an understanding it's going to be reused and accessed lots of times. So I don't think we should see detail as a word to be frightened of. It's more the clarity of the presentation of the detail and it being done in a form which is recognized and repeated and accessible and obviously relevant, because it has to be tied to the things that are key performance indicators. Not particularly fond of the term KPIs, but there is certain information governors need to see, and they need to see it regularly in a reliable format.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, hearing what Anne said early on about good chairmanship, and one of the measures of that being finishing on time, I will now bring this to a close, and I'll do so by thanking Hannah, thanking Sheila, thanking Anthony, and thanking Anne for excellent presentations tonight. They've been short, they've been clear, they've been absolutely on the point. And together, they've given us a very sort of complex and complete look at this subject. Secondly, I'd like to thank Anne and Sheila again for being my running mates in putting this series together. And Sheila will be chairing the next one of these. And also to thank Keith and thank Karen from the office for all that they have done to support this. And finally, my thanks go to you for joining us tonight. Some of you I know serve as governors, and I hope that you will join us for future editions of this. While I was doing that, Gabriel put her hand up. Would you like to put your questions? It's like
no, not a question. I was just going to thank our education committee for putting on this wonderful webinar. All the speakers, they gave us so much to think about, wonderfully presented, so professional and really, really useful. And just to leave it, and David, thank you for chairing it tonight. And just to leave it, I think, Anthony, the thing you said about not expecting enough for the children is so important. That's what it's all about. They're the future. When you become a governor, it's all about how well those children can do. So thanks a lot, and I can't wait for the next one.
Well, thank you, and thank you all. And I look forward to seeing you with Sheila on the 13th.